Hi, my name is Miss Bogard, and today I'm going to teach you about your computer. We're going to talk about your external parts and the internal parts of a computer. We're also going to talk a little bit about how the parts work and how you might be able to understand them better, so that if you can find yourself in a situation where you want more video gaming capabilities, things like that, you're going to understand better how you would actually go about doing that. Okay, so with that said, we're going to get started with the external parts first. Okay, here we go. Adjust my camera here. Our external parts of the computer would consist of your monitor, keyboard, mouse, or printer. Okay, all right, so here you see the monitor. I'm going to scoot it in just a little better so you can see it. All right, you have two types of monitors. You would have a CRT, which would be the more older model of monitor, which is what this is. It stands for cathode ray tube. As you can see, there's a really long back to this. The more standard type of monitor you would see is an LCD, which stands for liquid crystal display. All right, so that's the definition that you would happen to see out on those monitors today. Okay, and our keyboard looks about like this. It has little tabs on the back of it that helps you to set it up, things like that. There are different types of keyboard these days. One of the things that you might see is a wireless keyboard. This one actually has the old type of plug-in, which we're going to talk about here in just a little bit. All right, and the mouse. This mouse is a wireless mouse, which, like I said, we're going to talk about all the different types here as we get into the ports. The wireless mouse requires that you have a USB port to plug into your computer in order to make it work. All right. The other type of mice that you might have seen before would have this type of a plug-in, just like the keyboard has, and we'll talk about that when we get into our ports as well. The other thing I was telling you about was the external part is a printer. There are laser printers, which would look like this. Hopefully you can see that pretty well. All right, and then your inkjet printers, which most homes would have that type of printer. And then the newer models today is actually on my camera because it was upstairs and I didn't want to bring it down. So I'll show you a picture of it, and hopefully you can get a better understanding of what that one looks like. Okay. All right, I hope that's not too much of a glare, but probably get a good look on that. I do have the lid up on that, so you can see that it also has a scanner attached to it, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more here in just a minute as well. Okay, so that's our external parts. Now we're going to get into the ports. All right, so here you can see that, and I will show you that on the actual computer here in just a moment, but first of all, I wanted to tell you about, you have most ports are called I/O ports, which means input and output. Hopefully you're able to read all of that. Okay. All right. Then we have what we call the legacy ports, which the legacy ports was for your keyboard and your mouse, things like that. We have some other types of ports that I would like to talk about with you. And those would be the USB ports, which I showed you with that little bitty piece that goes with my mouse. And those are called universal system bus, okay, serial bus, I'm sorry, universal serial bus. And you can see the symbol that I've drawn on there. That's what actually you're going to see on your card, your expansion card, or anywhere that you're going to need to use a USB. That's the symbol that you'll see. And then the FireWire, or the IEEE, or they call it 1394 or FireWire ports. Don't know why they have so many names, but that is used for your more high performance and for higher speed things that you would connect to your computer. All right, so that's about the ports, and I'm going to actually give you a visual of what they look like on your computer. Now, of course, you'll know that computers are different depending on the case and different things, different cases on different computers. We have desktop computers, we have the tower computers, which this one here is the tower. I'm going to show you the ports now that we just talked about, okay? The two top ports right here are your legacy ports. Remember, I told you they were for your mouse and your keyboard. And the port that I showed you before, this is to my keyboard, connected to this keyboard right here. So, okay, so that would plug into your legacy ports. This, I'm not sure if you can tell through the camera, but this actually is a purple end to it right here. And it's going to plug into where this legacy port that is purple. Now, you can't just like shove them in there. There is a specific way they have to go in. There is like this one little pin at the tip of it that you have to make sure that, and it's just like a little hole, and you can kind of see it if you look really closely to that port, where that has to go into exactly. What's nice about the fact that they put this side, it's a flat side, so if you have that on the flat side, then you can actually plug it straight in, and you want to make sure that you're not forcing it, because you could break off the pins and make it not work. Okay? This is the serial port for your monitor. And I'm sorry, I'm going to have to bring this down just a little bit so you can see that. It's actually on a card. So your monitor would plug into this, and this is one here would be, now typically you would have a monitor plug in up in here too, but this one does not have that. So it is actually on the card. So you can see that it is down here, and this is what it looks like. Now, just a minute, I'll show you exactly how that plugs in, but I wanted to quickly touch base on the printer port, which people don't use this port much anymore. This was the original printer port, and it's used mostly for the slower printers. I'm sure there are still some people that use them, so you do need to know about it, but this is where the printer port plugs into if it's not on a USB type plug-in. The reason why they decided to no longer, make things that use this is you had additional things that you would add on to this, like a scanner or other external drives that you would plug into that, and so there were so many things being made that needed this same port that they decided to start using the USB ports, which were a faster way for things to operate anyway, so it really worked out better that they used the USB ports, which is this card right here that I've added to, and you'll understand why I'm calling it a card here in just a moment. But these are all for the USB ports, and to show you how that works, this little USB thing that I showed you earlier for my mouse, which is very tiny, we'll plug right into that, and that's what a USB port looks like. So now I'll quickly show you the other end of the monitor so you can see how that one plugs in and what it looks like. So here's the end of your monitor plug, okay? And you also want to make sure that you have that plugged in and turned in the right direction. These pins need to go exactly, and here again, you don't want to shove those in because you can bend them and break them off. So you want to make sure that you're going in, and this port here actually has the holes that each one of these pins plugs straight into, and that's where your monitor goes into. So as you can see, and then you want to screw those in like that to make sure that it's good and secure. Okay. All right, with that said, we're ready to move to the internal parts of your computer. Inside the case. Now, before we move into that part, I would like to tell you that you want to make sure that you are grounded before you go to the inside of your computer. Now, like I said too, the cases are different on each computer, so the ways to take the case apart or to get the casing off to get into the inside of your computer would be different depending on the type of computer. But to be grounded just means that your body has static electricity in it, and if your body with that static electricity would touch any of these parts inside, you would cause them to break down and not be able to work. So a way to keep you from having all this static transfer into there is to touch something metal. Lucky for me, the casing of my computer is metal, so I'm good. So as long as I'm touching any part of this outside of this computer, then I'm good. Another thing that is very, very dangerous to the inside parts of your computer is dust. So you want to make sure that there's, and dust collects inside our computers quite easily. So, but one thing you do not want to do is you do not want to use a vacuum to suck the dust out of the computer, because that, of course, is electricity as well, and so it's going to break down the parts pretty quickly and easily. The best way to do that would be maybe a hair dryer, blow dryer, or something like that. Anything that would blow the dust out rather than, you know, put something lead electrical in there. So this computer is a computer that I actually built myself, and it has, I don't know if you can see it or not because our lighting is not the best here, and because it's kind of, you know, hard to get inside the computer there, but there's actually a fan right here that's actually specifically to work for just, you know, getting the dust out. Okay, so you might be able to see it after I kind of spun it a little bit and see it moving there. Okay, all right, so so let's kind of go over quickly before I go in depth on the insides of the parts, what we're actually looking for. Scoot this back a little bit so you can actually see this. All right. All right, so we have our motherboard. Pull this back just a little bit so you can see this is internal parts, so you can take good notes and be able to do this on your own someday. All right, so the motherboard is actually the main, you might hear some people call it the main board. Everything is housed on the motherboard, and it's the base, it's the mother of all the parts, but it's the base, and everything connects to it. Then we have the power supply, the expansion slots, or cards, and that's where you heard me talk about the cards a moment ago, your CPU, the RAM, ROM, and your hard disk. Okay, so that's not a full inclusion of all parts that can go inside a computer, but this is a good start for you to kind of see, and these are the parts that we're going to kind of go in depth over. All right, we're going to start off with the power supply. The power supply is a 19th century invention. It actually runs on watts, and depending on the amount of internal parts that you have, will determine how many watts that you want on your power supply. The basic, just a normal number would be anywhere from 150 to 200 watts. A good average would be 350 or so. One that's really powerful, has a lot of parts inside, and using a lot of graphics and things like that. You could go up to a 750 watt power supply. So it has its own fan. This is the outside here. This is the power supply from the outside. It has its own fan to keep everything cool, and because this is your, the central part of power, the electricity comes from this. You're plugged from the outlet from your wall outlet to the power supply to get all the electricity to each of the parts on the motherboard. Okay, so as you can see then, there's cables, colored cables, that go to every part in here that needs to have the electricity in order for it to run. The main plug here goes to the motherboard right here. And if you can see that main big part here that's connected to the motherboard, which is back there. All right, so anything that's needing that electrical power, it goes straight to the motherboard or to the parts like that. So that's how our power supply supplies the electricity to all the internal parts. All right, so we're going to move on to the expansion slots, and they are these cards right here are plugged into the expansion slots. Now the expansion slots are for those things like your graphics card, your sound card, anything that you need to add. I have my Ethernet card here so that I can connect to the internet. Another thing these days, people will have a wireless internet thing, so they may not need that extra Ethernet card. And here, the little plug-in here for the USB ports, those are all on cards. Now, I want to tell you, those ports that we showed you out here, You can remove this little part right here. You can see it has a screw where it was in there. I went ahead and took that out for just ease of explanation today. So if you pull this off, even without this screw on it, I had to struggle a little bit here. We'll get this off. There you go. Slides off. And it gives you access here to the screws that hold those cards in. So we're going to go ahead and take one of those off so that you can kind of get a better idea of what the expansion card slots, how they actually go into that slot. So let me get this off of here. You just unscrew it here, which helps it to stay secure. And then you're going to just pull it out of the slot. It just kind of wiggles out here. There you go. And this is one of the actual cards. This one here was the sound card I talked about. Okay, so the end of the parts look like that. I'm not able to see here what you're actually seeing. There we go. That's what the end part looks like. What we saw outside on our ports before I showed you that part of it. I'm going to set this aside. I'll go back in. I don't know if you can actually see the expansion slots. Let me turn this down just a little bit here, or this right here, where I just pulled that out of. Hopefully you can see that. Yeah, that's a little better. You can see those there. Okay, and that's your expansion slots, and that's where your graphics card is housed, and any other cards that you may want to add. Okay. All right, the next thing I'm going to talk about is your CPU. The CPU stands for Central Processing Unit. And in this computer, it's under all of this. You see there's a fan here. We're going to talk about a heat sink. And then under that is where the actual CPU is connected onto the motherboard. So just to give you a better understanding, rather than take all of that out because there's just so much, it would take a little bit of time to show you all of that. The actual CPU that's underneath all of these parts looks like this. It has several little pins. You definitely do not want to touch those pins. Any one of those pins actually gets bent, then it would not work. So one of the things that's very nice about how they set this up is you cannot go wrong in the way that you slide this in, because there is one corner right here. There's one corner on this, there we go, on this side that is different from the others, that helps you to see actually in your, hopefully I'm trying to get you like a really good view of this so that you can see that there's part of it that's right here where it's different than all the other corners, so you know that you're putting it in exactly right, so exactly in the way that it could go. So if you're trying to put it in like this, or you know, any other way, you know that it's not going to go in, except for it's going to match up to the side that has the cornered in on it like that. So you will slide that into the motherboard, all right, exactly in that square, exactly the way it wants to go in there. And then your fan needs to go on top of that. The reason being is, now, like I said, this one has a heat sink first and then a fan. The reason for that is because the CPU that I actually have in this computer is a very fast, high-speed CPU, which there are different types. There's the Intel, there's the Pentium actually 2, 3, and 4. So, I mean, they've actually improved over and over again. The CPU is actually the thing, it's the central processing unit, and it runs everything in your computer. All the instructions have to go through the CPU to the memory, and that's, you know, that's why it needs to be pretty fast. So we're going to get into some detail exactly what you're looking at as far as the bits and things like that here in just a moment, but right now I just kind of want to talk to you about how it's put into the computer. And like I said, it gets really hot because of the processing and the speed of what it goes. So that's why there's a need for a heat sink or a fan to be on there to keep it cooled at all times. The heat sink is a thermal unit that pulls the heat away from the CPU, and the fan, of course, tells itself exactly what it would just cool it down. So, and like I said, in this case, my computer has the heat sink on it, and then the fan on top of that. So you're going to see different things in different computers, but and the way that you would attach it, you see that there's different, like these little sides here. They would actually attach onto the motherboard. And I'm sure that you could probably find some YouTube videos out there that can give you a more detailed way of exactly which side goes in first, which side goes in last. But I can tell you that this one here is going to be the side that goes in last, the one that has the longer piece to it. You'll put this other side in, and then you'll push down on that side. Hopefully that's a little helpful information for that. All right, so to give you a little bit more detail about the CPU, it performs all your basic math calculations, and it gets information from the input devices and transfers it into your memory, and it does all your input-output operations. So it's measured in bits. You might see, like on the requirements of your software programs and stuff, it might say 32 bits, 64-bit, 128-bit. What that is talking about is it's in more terms that would be easier for you to understand, would be like the lanes of a highway. So I mean, if you have more lanes of a highway, you can get more traffic on that road. Same thing with that bit size. You could get more information getting sent to the CPU at one time, and without it freezing up with the higher size bits. So anyway, and then the processor speed, you're going to see on a lot of programs that will say that the speed is measured in gigahertz. You have like 3 gigahertz or 6 gigahertz, and that's just the speed of how the information is getting processed. So that might help you when you're actually looking for software, or buy a computer to see what you might need. So of course, before you buy a computer, you want to make sure that the parts inside of it are going to do the things that you want to do, such as maybe video gaming or video editing, or just if it's just a basic word processing computer. That would make a big difference on what you would choose for your CPU. And next, what we're going to talk about, your memory. Because your memory looks like this. Actually, this is the old, they used to come in what they call the SD, which was a synchronized, stood for synchronized dynamic random access memory. All right, so that's what this SD cards looked like. And we now are more commonly using what we call DDR, and that comes in a DDR 1, 2, or 3. And the DDR stands for double data rate. And as you can see, this RAM, I'm trying to get it to where it's not blurry, has those chips on both sides. See the little black chips here? And this one's mostly covered by stickers. I've got to figure out which way I'm going here. Okay. So this has it on both sides. These are like the storage spaces, like your little storage bins that you can use at the, and so as you can see, the older SD did not have the chips on the back side of it. It was flat, and it only had it on one side. So this is, the newer ones give you the ability to hold more information in order to send it through and store it and make it be able to receive more information at one time. All right, and this, as far as where it is at on your motherboard, hopefully you can see here. I've left one in there so you can see it and see how it comes out. So there's 2 clips on the slot that these go into, and you just pull up on those clips. As you can see, I pushed up, down, and then back up to make them release. So we're going to take this one out so that you can actually see it. I just pushed on that one and push on this bottom one. And you have to hear them click all the way, and then it slides right out. And you can see that there's only one way that that's going to fit back in there, because this side is a little longer than this side. This side's the longer side. And you have just the little slot here, okay, that's like a little cut open spot. So it's only going to fit back in there the way that it came out. So we're going to go back in, and you're going to need to hear, it needs to go in exactly the way that it came out, and you're going to push down on each end to put that in. And it helps to be able to see everything that you're doing, because it's not that easy. And it's definitely, it's easier when you have your computer laying flat too, but you should hear the snap when you put it back in as well. And you have to make sure that both ends have their pins. There we go. The pins have to be pushed all the way open in order for it to go back in. So here we go. Let's make sure that one's all the way open. And we're going to push it back into that spot. And here we go. I'm going to push this back a minute. And you should hear a snap. That's not it. It never works when you want it to, right? That's just the way that things go. Well, I'm determined, so okay, no, we're going to go past that anyway. It does snap back in, just trust me. But that gives you a very good view of how that goes in. Okay, all right, so we're going to go back now to the hard drive. That's our last thing on our list there. And the hard drive is right here. And you can see that you would unscrew these screws right here. And of course, have to take the back side of your casing off, so you could get to it from the back side as well, and it would slide out. And to give you an idea of what's going on inside, this is what we call our storage drive. This is what stores all your information. And what you're looking for is, it's for your permanent storage. It keeps all the information long term. It's measured by RPMs. And what the RPMs stand for is revolutions per minute. A good number would be, you're looking for, is a 7,200 RPM. And the lower the RPMs are, the longer it will take to find your information and bring it up to your screen. So this is where your Windows operating system would be installed to. Anything that you want to save and keep long-term for permanent is what you would store here. All right, I want to talk a little bit more about RAM. We'll come back to this for just a second. The RAM stands for Random Access Memory. Okay, so random, it's not permanent, like we talked about with your hard drive. So when you shut your computer off, all the information that was sent to the RAM and in these little storage bins is erased. It's gone. So when you turn it back on the next day, the information in those will not be there any longer, but they will be in the permanent storage. We talked about ROM. ROM means read-only memory, and it's housed on the motherboard. And mine is underneath. It's really good that I took one of those cards out because it's underneath all of these parts. And it's on the motherboard. And it's actually right here. I don't know if you can see that from here. I think if I move those parts up that you can actually see it there. It's right here. Okay, so it's actually a chipset that's completely on the motherboard that's not, cannot be taken off. And what it houses is, it's, like I said, it's called read-only memory, and it's permanent. It's what actually stores what we call BIOS, which stands for Basic Input Output System. So when your computer starts up, it first looks for the BIOS, and you probably have seen that on your screen before. And that is the information that tells your hard drive to bring out the information to start up, to boot your computer into the operating system, the Windows operating system. There's a section on your hard drive that stores your operating system, and the read-only memory goes straight to the hard drive and tells it exactly to boot the computer up, gives it that information, the specific information to get it started. So we call those the configuration files as well. So that stores that, and it cannot be, it's permanent, cannot be changed, and it's set that way because people want to make sure that if your hard drive does happen to crash and you put a new one in, at least you have the booting ability still, because that information that's stored in the ROM. So with that said, that's a little more information about our internal drives and our external drives. So hopefully that answers any questions that you might have. I also want to talk to you about the graphics card. The graphics card tells the monitor what to display. It determines your PC's graphic potential, such as how many resolutions of the images that you want to see on your screen, like pixels. Pixels is how many dots per inch. That's what you'll see a lot of things say how many pixels it has in there, and that stands for dots of ink per inch in that area. So you have probably heard of something, and this is my video card right here. We kind of talked about that with the port out here. Your monitor plugged into here. This is your video graphics. It also has a little extra thing that will plug into it that just kind of tells me it's a little bit faster. We'll do a little bit more with your graphics. But the card itself, I'm not sure if you can see, it has its own little chips on it as well. There's memory chips on the video card as well, and that's what displays things such as, gives it the ability for higher resolution, more colors, or maybe even 3D graphics. So anyway, that's pretty much what I have for you today on your internal parts, your external parts, information on how to keep your computer running or add to or take away from. We have our CD-ROM drive here that you're probably familiar with. I called it a CD-ROM. One thing I wanted to point out is used to the ROM, like I told you before, ROM is a read-only memory. Before, when they had first made the CD-ROMs, they were you couldn't write to them or save to them or anything like that. So now they're writable, and you can save to them and stuff like that. So now they more commonly are called the CD drive. There's the other wells here, as you can see. I actually have the old floppy disk drive in there as well, which that's pretty old, but these other wells can house other items that you might add to your computer as well. So hopefully, sorry, don't need my glasses for this. Hopefully that helped you get a little bit more information about your computer and maybe answer some questions, anything that you might want to do to add to or take away from. Hopefully you have better luck with your RAM than I did. I will get it back in there though, I promise you. But hopefully that helped you today. And thank you for watching, and have a great day.